Now, what we do know about John Schumann is that Mum and Dad and Dinny saw the passing out parade from Puckapunyal, but we know there is so much more to this man than one song. That's why we've chosen to play a couple of different songs today. John Schumann is on the phone. Hello, John.
Hey boys, how are you?
Good, you got Neil here. Rob is the other one. Now, I need to take you to task, if you don't mind, just to start off with. I'm holding a piece of cardboard in my hand which contains 2 CDs called Corrugated Highway. Some bloke scribbled his name on the front of it. What's going on there?
Spoilt the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, serious. It says something John Schumann, maybe?
That was very nice of you, John. Thank you very much for doing that.
Pleasure.
So, Red Gum is where a lot of people would associate you with, but you've been doing a lot of other work, including with Vagabond Crew. Take us through that journey.
Well, I left Red Gum in 1986, even though that's the band that I'm, most readily associated with.
That's 40 years ago, John.
Yeah, please don't say that.
It's a bit like me living in Geelong for 15 years, and if another 25, I'll be a local.
But I sort of, after I left Red Gum, I kind of, in a desperate attempt not to be absentee father of the year, I spent a fair bit of time at home, still, releasing the album under my own name. Then in 2005, executive produced an album that I wanted to do for a long time, which was an album called Lawson. I wrote a whole lot of songs based on the poems of Henry Lawson. That was really, really successful, and I sort of got back into it, and we created a band called the Vagabond Crew, just for the album. That was from a line taken from one of the poems that Henry Lawson wrote that I put to music. Anyway, that band sort of had various members that came and went for 20 years now, and in the last sort of 7 or 8, the band has devolved back to being essentially an Adelaide band, and we've been playing together and touring and making the odd record and everything since then. So while everybody, knows me as the bloke from Red Gum, I mean, the fact is I've been in the Vagabond Crew for twice as long as I was in Red Gum.
John, I made a mistake when we were chatting earlier by suggesting that your music is country. It was really a conversation slip. But the reality is it's very hard to put you in a box of music because I reckon you're so unique. What would you describe your style of music?
Oh, look, I describe myself as an Australian singer-songwriter, like lots of others, and I just use whatever musical form is right for the song that I'm writing. So there are ballads, and there's a bit of rock and roll, and there's some folk, and there's some country, and there's some country rock, and so it's very hard for me even to pin the tail on the donkey. I don't really know how to describe the sort of music that I write and perform, but it's a broad church, let's say that.
Because I imported a couple of tracks from your CD that I bought the other day into my laptop so I could play them off the laptop, and Mr. Apple, he decided, or she decided, that you are described as songwriter. That's the genre that you fit into.
Well, good on Mr. Apple. That's pretty right, I reckon.
Now, John, I mean this in the nicest possible way. Don't take it wrong. You're not Pavarotti. You're not John Farnham. Your voice is really, really unique, and it reminds me. It's just like bush poetry with music. It's a voice that captivates the listener because you are telling stories, and I reckon it's got that tone that makes you sit up and actually listen to the lyrics rather than listen to the music. And do you write with that intent?
Not now, and not back then. Look, essentially when Red Gum first started, a very close friend of mine who taught me philosophy at Flinders University, who was in fact instrumental in helping Red Gum get together, said to me, "Why do you sing like an American?" And I said, I don't. He said, you do. Anyway, we sang into a cassette, and there I was singing like an American. And when I stopped and thought about it, I thought it was completely ridiculous. Everybody else was doing it at the time, which is why I did it. So I decided that I would sing like an Australian. And the very first album Red Gum did, which is a classic now called If You Don't Fight, You Lose, has this young bloke singing like Chips Rafferty. And it was, I was consciously singing like an Australian. That caught everybody's ear, interestingly enough, and became quite a thing. I suppose as the years have gone on, I don't have to be so self-conscious about it. I open my mouth and I sing, and I've sort of found my own place, my own voice. But back in the day, early, it was very much a conscious thing to sing like an Australian. I couldn't work out why everybody sang like an American. I mean, everybody. I've got really good mates in the music industry who sing like Yanks. And back in the day, in Red Gum, I mean, we weren't played on the air, and we weren't on television, we weren't all of that stuff, because they didn't like my voice. My voice stuck up like a head on a stick. And people were particularly the powers that be, didn't think that it slipped easily into the formats that they had at the time. Then, of course, but the interesting thing was that while radio and television ignored us or blocked us, people came to the shows in absolute droves. And they also bought the records in their thousands. And I remember one time, shortly after I'd written I Was Only 19, Red Gum was playing down at the Chevron on St Kilda Road, and it was a late Friday night, and into the dressing room after we played walked Keith Fowler, who was back then the music programmer for 3XY, which back then was the biggest station.
Hot hits, if you don't mind.
Station broadcasting. I mean, and what Keith Fowler did and programmed, everybody else did. And he walked into the dressing room, and I knew who he was, and I knew that they wouldn't play our stuff because they thought we were too Australian and too political and yada, yada, yada. So I gave him a few rude things to him. Bless him, he did say to me, look, you're fair enough. He said, we're not playing your stuff. But he said, I'll tell you this, I've been to 5 of the headline gigs around Melbourne tonight, and I've got to tell you, of all the gigs I've been to with all the big names that we're playing, you have the largest and the most attentive crowd. And he said, so if we're not playing your music, it's us who are irrelevant, not you. And he went back to the station that night, let himself in, the note for the staff to put I Was Only 19 on high rotation.
That made a difference to your career enormously, I imagine.
Yeah, well, look, we had a pretty strong following, and we had to deal with a major label because the record company knew that we sold records, even if nobody else did. But yes, no, certainly, Keith's support for I Was Only 19 really sort of, sparked the bushfire that ended up being Red Gum. And of course, the fact that he got behind I Was Only 19 and the other radio stations got behind it too, helped change a lot of things for Vietnam veterans and veterans of war subsequently.
I suppose the other thing that plays in your favour a little is that if they're not playing it and people love your music, they've got to come and see you and they've got to buy records, don't they? It's a bit like famously Skyhook's Living in the 70s album. 7 of the songs were banned, so everyone went out and bought a copy because they couldn't hear it on the radio.
Yeah. Well, we were a bit like that, and I remember when we were they didn't want us on Countdown. When we signed with the major labels, I think it was CBS Epic at that time, they were desperate to get us on Countdown because all the other big bands were on Countdown. And Countdown, we weren't keen because we thought it was bullshit. Everybody, all these kids waving their hands around. It wasn't what we did, It wasn't what we did. But anyway, we sort of just played along, hoping that we didn't have to do it. Anyway, the people on Countdown at that time said, "Oh no, we don't want them. They're too political and don't like that guy's voice, and it doesn't fit with our format." So anyway, it was me, I think, who said, "Okay," to the rest of the group, "Okay, look, rather than them, say they're not going to have us on Countdown, look, we don't want to go on anyway. So regardless of what happens, let's refuse to go on Countdown." So we became the band. This is before Midnight Oil. We were the band who refused to go on Countdown. And that was quite. We were quite famous for that, and we got quite a following just from that. Mm. So. Sometimes it does pay to swim against the tide.
Yeah, is that something with your storytelling and highlighting issues? Do you think doing something like that just kept you to a side of mainstream, and therefore people continue to be intrigued?
I think so. Look, when we first started off, this is Red Gum, of course, and we're here to talk about the Vagabond Crew. But look, let's get this one out of the way. When Red Gum originated from a university course called Politics, which examines the nature of the relationship between art and politics. So we actually wrote a set of songs, which actually largely became our first album, which demonstrated that we understood what the course was about. Those songs were quite issue-based, and we didn't really know what we were doing all that much. So they were fairly strident, and they were fairly undergraduate. I mean, they got us off the mark. So we can't complain about that. But I think over the years, me particularly as a songwriter, learned that you didn't have to preach and proselytise. You could actually make your social and political points by telling stories. Because I've always had the view, boys, that if you want Australians to think about something, if you want Australians to change the way they think or change the way they behave, then don't preach, don't proselytise, don't do death by PowerPoint, Tell Australians a story. And Australians, we're great. We're a nation of storytellers, And Australians will listen to the story, respond to the story, and they will take what they need to take from the story to change their behaviour or the way they think or the way they act.
Yeah, there's a bit in that.
So stories are the teaching thing. I mean, I think you guys just played Fishing Net in the Rain.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. Yeah,
which is from the album, but it's the only song on the album that's not part of the Gum oeuvre, because that Corrugated Highway is just one thing that the Vagabond Crew does, and we've decided we would record the Red Gum, our show called The Red Gum Years, we'd record that live. Fishing Net in the Rain is a story. It's a story about a young chief air officer from the Navy going by the name of David Finney, who took his own life in 2019. And I wanted to bolt a human face onto the Royal Commission into Veteran Suicide, because it's very easy to overlook, spiral-bound reports and things, okay? But it's very hard to overlook a story. So I wanted to tell a story. I did that in the song. My manager Ivan wrote the music, and I think we can all take from that song. We can kind of understand what it was like to be a sailor in the RAN up in the Timor Sea and the Arafura Sea trying to stop the boats.
Definitely. Let's talk about the Vagabond Crew then. We know that Red Gum started in a philosophy class. How did the Vagabond Crew come? Did you find them, or did they find you?
Look, I put together a whole bunch of friends and musicians to record the Lawson album in 2005. And look, there was lots of my friends played on the album. Russell Morris played on it and sang on it. The Dingoes reformed on one track. Red Gum reformed on one track. We hadn't played together for about 15 years. Robbie Hurst from Midnight Oil came and played and sang. My really good mate, Shane Howard from Goanna, came and played. Marsh played. So it was a who's who of the music industry at the time. Then the Vagabond Crew was just named and put together for that album project. But then we got asked to play the album live, so I put together a band, and some of the high profile people who contributed to the album came and played along, which was great. But then gradually the band kind of devolved into just John Schumann and the Vagabond Crew being a bunch of musicians. And I had people from Brisbane and Melbourne, and one guy was from Sydney, and one guy was from Adelaide, and it was a bit of a national band, if you like. It was a bit unwieldy because if we wanted to do anything, we had to fly in from all corners of the earth and rehearse ourselves. So as various people, sort of came and went, the band evolved back to being, a wholly Adelaide band, based on a corporate band here in Adelaide called Acoustic Juice. And I played with those guys a fair bit when I was, if I had to do a conference or something like that, they would back me for a half an hour floor show. So we became friends, and gradually as the interstate players dropped off or went their own way, the Vagabond Crew devolved to be an Adelaide band. So that's really the story behind that. Some of those guys, a lot of those guys in the Vagabond Crew, I've been playing with off and on for 25 years, so, there's a fair history there.
Well, John, the album was recorded at the Memo Music Hall in St Kilda in August last year, so it's quite contemporary in that respect. Our friend Melinda Schneider's playing there next week, as a matter of fact, at the Memo Music Hall, so that's a good place to look out for. The album is called Corrugated Highway, subtitled The Red Gum Years. It's 2 CDs. Is it available on vinyl for the vinyl phobes amongst us?
Yes, it is. Look, it's not, I don't know whether it's widely known, but we've decided back when we made the album that we weren't going to stream the album, at least for the foreseeable future.
Yep.
Because, the streaming services are just unconscionable. They just don't. It's just ridiculous. You make an album. I remember if we streamed the album, I remember calculating with my manager that we would have to have 8 million streams of the album just to break even at the rate that they pay. They pay 1/3 of a cent per song that they stream.
Which works really well if you're Taylor Swift, but doesn't work well if you're a musician that doesn't have a multi-billion-dollar empire, I suspect.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's just not fair. It's just absolutely not fair. And, so our position is, the people from Spotify and Apple streaming and all those streaming platforms, they can make their own albums and they can stream them for nothing.
Yeah.
Decided that we wouldn't do it, and honestly, it's been fantastic. We've had so much support. There's an online shop on my website, and people go on and pick what they want from the shop. And Corrugated Highway's obviously a big seller. And then, believe it or not, my manager and I get together on Monday with the orders, and we pack them up and take them down to the post office ourselves. Because it's a cottage industry, but at least we get a fair return for
absolutely,
and all the work we've done.
And even if you can buy it somewhere else, we strongly encourage people, when you're buying CDs, and please buy CDs to support these guys who've given us so much pleasure. The money goes to the artist and the band and so on. So the website is schumann.com.au. So that's SCHUMANN, Schumann. There's no John in front of it. Schumann.com.au, and buy this album. There's 21 tracks on it, and the great thing about a live album is if you listen to it on a CD rather than the occasional song here and there shuffled on your CD, on your iPod or whatever, then you get the whole feel of the performance as well. I haven't had a chance to listen to the whole thing yet because it only arrived on yesterday, but I do need to warn you, though, folks, if you do buy it from John, it will probably come with some scribble on the front of it. All right. It's very special to have that. I've got a limited collection of CDs that are signed by the artist, and yours is sitting right in amongst it. John, thank you for joining us today. It's a great-looking album. The songs we've heard so far are outstanding. We're not going to play I Was Only 19. We're going to play another one of the songs that was associated. All the songs are Red Gum except Fishing Down in the Rain there, so you'll know a number of them. The one we're going to play also charted. It's a song called I've Been to Bali Too.
Have you been to Bali, John?
Oh, yeah, once or twice. So I've got to say, I'm not crazy about Bali these days. I used to go back in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, and it was beautiful. It was a tropical paradise with a deeply religious under spirit. It was just absolutely fabulous. I mean, I believe it or not, I remember when Kuta Beach was a fishing village, and you rode your motorbike through 18 kilometres of rice paddies before you got to Denpasar.
And in fact, when you got to those beaches, you saw a whole stack of people standing with fishing nets in the rain.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But look, it was a beautiful place. But these days, it's just, I don't know. I'm so sad. I've got a really, really very close friend who's a Balinese guy. We've been friends for all of our lives, or since we met. And he comes to stay with me in Australia. In fact, he lived with us for about a year while he was at university down here. And our two families are very, very close. He's the closest thing I've got to a brother. And if it wasn't for Krishna and his family, who I love madly, I don't think I would go back because it's such a heartbreak. Having said that, I've been to Bali too. Was a song that told the story. It was tongue in cheek in some ways. It told a story, but it also, I tried to remind people that there was more to Bali than, getting pissed in a bar somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, here is the track from Corrugated Highway, John Schumann and the Vagabond Crew. Thanks, John, for joining us on Two Blokes Chatting.
Thanks, John, for today and all your work making us happy people.
Thanks, boys.